Hello and welcome back to your virtual tea time. My name is Tori and I'm your host. And today I am joined with Corey. Not just Corey though. Dr. Corey. Dr. Corey Gerrard.
Yeah, I haven't had that.
And I say that because I'm going to show you guys a Instagram reel I put out a couple weeks ago from the PGA show where I met Corey and we chatted about wedges. And the comments in it had me howling with the Dr. Corey references because you are indeed actually not a doctor.
Not even close.
It was just the white coat that really threw people off.
I could see that, but it's pretty dangerous too. So do not rely on me for any health advice.
Just you're the doctor of wedges? Can't there be a doctorate in wedges?
Not even that, but I'm surrounded by people who are. So there's some really clever people
and you probably know everything about wedges, and we are going to learn everything. And actually, before you pause the podcast episode and you're like, this is going to be a snore fest, why am I listening to this? I want to go through one thing that I did today, which was I went on the Titleist website and I went to the Vokey page, to the new SM10. They're showing off the new wedges, and I kind of went through the buying process. And just with clubhead alone, there were 25 different options, and maybe at least on the website.
Yeah.
And then you have endless shaft options and endless grip options. And I am going to challenge the listener, to you listening. Have you ever gone to the PGA Superstore or anywhere to buy wedges and just taken it off the rack and thought, oh, that's a 56. That will be good for me.
Yeah.
I mean, it's crazy how many options there are. So we are here to learn.
Great.
All about wedges.
Great.
And Dr. Corey will help us do that.
We're going to try.
But let's actually go back to the PGA show.
Yeah.
Okay? Because I want everyone to visualize what's going on at the PGA show, which it's madness. I mean, it is much bigger than you imagine it to be.
So busy. This year was really busy, particularly the Wednesday. When you and I met and you stand up top and you look all the way down Main Street at the PGA show, there were thousands and thousands of people. It was enormous. And then the next day the sun came out and I think they went and played golf, but it was still really busy.
Yeah. And actually, before we get into the white coats, what do you think? Do you think it's super busy because just everyday golfers are coming in to be there?
No, so early days, that's a lot of industry folk.
Yeah.
And then there are everyday golfers coming in later in the week. But I think it's a case of, when COVID came, people really missed the face-to-face stuff, particularly the golf industry. We're all here to make sure people have a good time, right? Mm-hmm. First and foremost. So we want to have a good time too. And I think people really missed that connection. Fast forward a couple of years, here we are today where everyone looked like they put their hand up this year and said, I want to go. It's a good time. I get to catch up with friends that I might not have seen in a long time. And there's some pretty cool new products there too. I don't know if you looked around the entire place, but there are things that you and I would never invent.
Yeah.
But they're there and they're cool when you see it.
Exactly. And you might need, and you probably maybe not need. Who knows? Right. Every facet of golf is there. Last year, I've been there 3 years in a row. And last year I watched the Titleist TSR drive. What was it called? The driver
We Go
video.
Farther.
We Go Farther.
Yeah.
So I watched that and I took my dad and I knew we had like to go see it at, let's just say it was like 2:00.
Right.
And we walk up to the Titleist. I don't even want to call it a booth because it's like, it's so big. It's
a very, very big booth.
The Titleist experience there is so big. And all the white jackets were there. Maybe they weren't yellow, right? They're always white.
Well, fun fact, they've always been white, but we did upgrade this year and they were really, really white.
They were super white.
So your eyes aren't playing tricks on you. The white jackets that we'd had for a period of time might have lost a little bit of the white and became a little more cream. Yeah. And then now it's definitely white.
It's super white. Yeah. So last year, my father, who is a beginner golfer, I mean, he doesn't even keep a handicap index. He's probably, he's shooting plus 100, he's up there. And he himself is actually very intimidated by the golf world. So we're walking towards the Titleist booth and I kind of dragged him to the PGA show to begin with. And he's like, we're going in there. Are you serious? And he got super intimidated, but we eventually went and watched the movie. It was fabulous. This year I went with my assistant, Ashley, and we're heading towards Titleist. And Ashley communicates with you guys at Titleist all the time. And she had the same reaction. She's like, "Are you serious? We have to go in there."
It's a lot of doctors.
Very intimidating, all those white jackets.
I think because it's in numbers. So when you go all the way back to the start of the Titleist white coat story, it was one individual in a crowd.
Yeah.
And that one individual had one white coat.
Yeah.
Whereas now, when you see a bunch of us all together, I could see that. It'd be a little intimidating until you walk into that booth and realize everyone's super friendly. They're there to help.
Absolutely.
And if you want to learn, you are surrounded by the right people.
Exactly. So tell us about that story, though. So it started for a reason, and it's just to more stand out in this environment, or how did it?
Long time ago, many decades ago, the PGA Tour really was a traveling circus. It is now, but it was more of a tight-knit family. And the PGA professionals at that time, they wanted to play a Titleist golf ball. And to get that Titleist golf ball, you had to see the Titleist rep first, who would give you a chit to take into the pro shop and redeem that for your golf balls for the week. So the easiest way to find the Titleist rep was to put them in a white jacket. And that's really where it started. So when someone would turn up to the event, gosh, what have I got? Golf balls. I need those. Where's the Titleist guy or girl? There they are in the white jacket. And that was the easy way for them to find them, grab their chit, and then go into the pro shop and grab those golf balls.
Dude, that's fantastic.
So we've worn that every year since for big functions. PGA Show is obviously one of those in the public forum, but we wear it with pride and a real testament and a throwback to the origins of the company.
See, so now that we know the story, it just becomes, it's very cool.
It is a really good story.
Yeah.
So as much as we might look like doctors, not quite.
So the video that we filmed at the PGA Show this past year, we were talking mostly about how frequent you should replace your wedges.
Yes.
And the question was, just that basic. How frequently should you be replacing your wedges? So if you're listening now, think about when you bought your last set of wedges, sand wedge, your lob wedge. I mean, would you agree even going up to gap wedge, pitching wedge?
Little less so.
Little less so. Okay.
Definitely those higher lofts.
Yeah.
So anything you're using around the green, definitely out of the bunker. So if you're sandblasting that club face, it's going to wear quicker. If you're a person that is playing, say, here in Phoenix, early morning, you might have some dew on the ground and that sand sticks. You know when the range ball starts to look like a snowball because you dragged it from the pile on the grass? Comes across and it gets bigger and it's caked in sand. That's not good for the grooves.
Yeah.
Probably not good for your practice either, but that's going to wear it out a little bit. So I think sand and lob wedge first.
Yeah. Okay, so tell us the answer to that question.
Okay, correct answer is it all depends. But that's not going to help our listeners. So we've done a bunch of study with R&D and testing, and we know both with human testing and robots that after 75 rounds of golf, or the equivalent of, you start to see spin come down. So the important thing to note there is, if you play the equivalent of 75 rounds and you practice a lot with the product, it's not going to stop working. It's not going to run out of gas and just stop one day. But you're going to see the spin start to come off a little bit. If you fast forward that to 100 rounds or 125 rounds, it's going to wear even more. What are we looking for? So you're looking for performance on the green and through the air as well. So generally speaking, if your wedge is starting to wear out, it's going to launch a little high. It's going to run up the face because it's not getting that grip. And it's actually going to carry shorter and then roll out further. So they're the telltale signs. Problem is, we're playing golf with that club every week or practicing with it all the time. So a lot of golfers don't know this is happening, Tori, because it doesn't happen overnight.
Yeah.
So if I saw you every day and I decided for some strange reason to grow a mustache, you probably wouldn't notice I grew that because you see me every day.
Yeah.
If I came back and did this pod with you a year from now, you'd be like, what have you done? Why did you do that? And it was noticeable. So I think it's the same thing here when it comes to groove wear. If you're playing with it all the time, it's very hard to see that that's happening. And you've probably made things happen to fix that. You've probably tried to hit it harder to carry it further. You might be trying to flight it lower because you're just seeing this thing that's launching a little softer and a little weaker and definitely not spinning as much.
Yeah. So then let's get to the basics of what do we need to have our wedges to be able to do? How are our wedges going to best serve us?
Yep.
And when that wear and tear starts to happen, you just explained what happened, but what what should the wedge be able to produce for us?
The wedge should be able to come out really low and spin and stop very quickly. And that is regardless of player ability. So the cool thing about wedge play, Tori, is you don't have to be the world's best player to be good at it. And you don't have to be the world's strongest or fastest player to be good at it. Little different if you want to hit it a mile down the fairway, but around the green, anyone can be really good. And you'll know that you're doing it right. You've got to select the right golf ball. Yeah. That is absolutely paramount.
Okay, so step one, really figure out which golf ball your game needs.
Correct.
Okay.
And then really it's a pretty simple 3-step process. Number 1, find the right golf ball. Number 2, have fresh grooves. And number 3, clean all the stuff out of those grooves. They have a job to do. The job of the groove is really important. Yeah. So it's there to really channel debris such as grass, sand, all of that stuff into the groove so the ball can hit the sharp edge of the groove and bite and stick. And that's what's giving it spin. If your grooves are full of sand or dirt, it's not going to spin. It's going to launch really high. It's not going to carry very far, and it's going to roll a lot. So step 1, going back to your original question of how do we find the right ones and how do we know if we've got the right ones, it's really all about contact, believe it or not. Yeah. So you don't have to be an expert on everything wedges. You talked about the fact that we have 25 different options. That's a lot. If you walk into a golf shop and you see we have 25 different options, there are different sole grinds, there are different color options as well, and you've got right and left-handed, all of a sudden you are standing in front of a wall of wedges going, how on earth do I pick the right one for me? And we're acutely aware of that. So you have to go back a step to say, why do we have so many options? And that comes from Bob Vokey and the team working with tour players, men and women, over many, many different years going, hey, what do these players need? And then we get to more and more options. And that's where we end up today. We have different options for different playing styles and different conditions. And if you go back to that contact point, that's the most important part. So if you have a look here, Tori, on the bottom, there are 17 grooves on this wedge. There's a lot. You're really looking to make contact between grooves 2 and 5. If you do that, the ball's going to come out really low, spin a lot, and stop pretty quickly, which is the opposite to, I think, what a lot of people would try and do around the green.
Well, absolutely. I mean, I'm just when you are saying that you want the ball flight to be lower, I'm always thinking you want it to be higher. So you want it to be lower.
Definitely.
Because that produces the most spins. Because even if the height will help it stop still. Yeah. But the spin will really.
You are spot on. There are 2 different ways to stop a golf ball. You can either stop it through height and let it land softly, or you can drive it in and control that ball. When you get the lower ball flight, that's what you're getting. You are controlling distance and also the amount of rollout. When you're flying it in high, the ball tends to slip up the face. So you don't really have a lot of control in how much it's going to grab, how far it's going to go, and how far it's going to roll out. So you're leaving that into the lap of the gods a little bit. And that's why that low flight is really important. But it's the opposite of what most of us are talking about. You think of driver, we really want you to launch it pretty high, not a lot of spin, and get it going as fast as possible.
Yeah.
Irons, we really want you to land it, Tori, on a par 3 and have it coming in from a height so that it stops softly, like you said. Wedges are the opposite. And even if you want to go over a bunker, and I think this is an important one because if you want to go over a tree, fine. You might have to go up pretty high.
Yeah.
If you want to go over a bunker, last time I checked, most of them were underground.
Yeah.
They're not up high.
Okay, wait, that's good.
So do we really need to hit it high? And I'm being a little facetious, but...
I know, but that's a very simple way of probably what all of us are thinking.
Yes. We are standing there. We want to launch it over the bunker so that we can carry it first and foremost and then hope that it's going to stop on the other side. Now, of course, there are asterisks to that.
Yeah.
You know, if you have a down slope or there is a very high lip, I get it. But if you have to pitch it over a bunker, you can still flight it in pretty low as long as you've got some green to work with and stop it.
Yeah. Should there be lower expectations when you're coming out of rough?
Yes.
Sorry, that word was missing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Definitely. And it really comes back to the grooves. How much control do we get on the golf ball to ensure that ball hits the edge of the groove, right, to get that grip? So if you think we're hitting out of the rough, the job of the groove is to channel all of that grass into the groove. At some point, that's going to fill up.
Yeah.
So if you've got thick grass, all of a sudden you've done as much as you can to get that grass into the groove. Now there's going to be some that sits between the ball and the club face, and you're going to lose a little bit of that control. But we work really hard to make sure that we're getting it to spin from sand, short grass, and long grass.
Perfect. Okay, let's go basic on these terms.
Yes.
Okay. Grind, bounce, loft.
Great. I like this bit.
So let's get as basic as possible, because I can't tell you how many times someone has explained bounce to me.
Yeah.
And there is some, I can understand, but it's still like, let's just keep it as simple as possible. So let's start with grind. Or unless you want to start with something else that makes more sense.
I like grind.
Okay, let's start right there.
I've asked many different people to give me answers on this question, just like you're asking me. And I've had anything from a 2-page answer to where I'd rather go, and that's the shape of the sole.
Okay, so what part, and this is on YouTube too, everyone, so you can see what we're pointing at.
The sole is this part of the club, really the bottom of the golf club that interacts with the turf.
Okay.
So the grind is the shape of that. We have different shapes for different playing styles and different conditions. So let's talk about that for a second. If you are a player who is steep, so you might take a big divot, we have a different sole for you to keep that club moving through the turf. If you're someone who picks it very cleanly, so someone who might stand there for 20 minutes and never really even look like they were there because there's no divot, we have a different option for that player where the club can slide under much easily as well. So that's step one, is that. And then if you're in different conditions, Phoenix here is a really good example. You can get anything from baked out in the summertime to a different part of that same golf course where they just felt the need to put millions of liters of water on it.
Yes.
And it's super soft, right? So you're playing there, it's 100 degrees. It's as hot as anything and it's dry. And you think, why is the ground so wet? That's where it's really nice to have maybe different wedge options for those different conditions.
Yeah.
So we'd always talk about, hey, if you're going to have 2 or 3 wedges in the set, it might be smart to have 2 different soles, 2 different shapes on the bottom of that club. One for firm conditions, one for slightly soft conditions. Maybe you're in hard, firm conditions, but your bunkers are really soft.
Yeah.
Or depending on the quality of the course you're at, that might be reversed. So we'll go back to the basic version, the shape of the sole.
The shape of the sole. And then that, when you're looking at the club and the club options, you know the shape of the sole, the grind from what?
Okay, so the one you've got in particular, the M grind, is a little different to the one I've got here. So I'm going to grab both of these because some look really similar. And we didn't do that to trick you and be annoying, but you'll see this one here kind of looks like a regular golf club, just what you'd expect. Full sole, and it's got a little bit of work on the back here where the team has literally gone on a grinding wheel and taken some material off here. Okay, and that's for the player who wants to open the club face up or add some loft to it. This one's very different. If you're looking at this sole here, you can see that same team took this club, got on the grinding wheel, took part of the toe away, took part of the heel away, and took all this ribbon off the back. Why did they do that? They did that for this player because typically the player who's using an M grind or this shape of sole is someone who wants to do a lot of different things. They're picky. They need this club to be a jack of all trades. So they might be the player who plays it square, open, closed, sand shots, whatever, full shots. Whereas this player, the S grind, might be someone who just doesn't do any of that. They play it pretty square, so they never very much open the club face, and they do the same thing over and over again. Perfect for them. One's going to beat the other ones comfortably. So we have 6 different grinds in the lineup, and truthfully, the only way to find the right one is to hit them.
Yeah.
Now, you can do that in a golf shop, in a net, off a mat. Totally fine. Yeah. We have a wedge fitting app that can help you in 15 minutes. It answers all the tricky exam questions for you.
And we're going to get into fitting because that's a whole nother topic.
But the best way is to really do what you've done, and that's go outside, work with a fitter. And I would say more important, Tori, than finding the right one is finding the wrong one. When you find the wrong one, you get crappy contact, it doesn't work for you, kick it out.
Yeah.
That's not the one. And that's okay. And that would be the same whether that's an LPGA Tour player, PGA Tour player, or the best player at your club. It's the same for everyone. There's going to be something that suits far more than the others, and it's important to find the right one. It's going to give you the right contact in all those different conditions.
Okay, let's go to bounce.
Okay.
Because to me, I feel like what you just explained very simply, thank you, the sole, I would think that was bounce too. So tell us what bounce is and how you can differentiate.
Well, they work together.
Okay.
But bounce is, so bounce is to do with the sole. So that's important.
I've really been playing and studying golf for a long time, I promise.
No, I think, hey, it doesn't matter if you are number one player in the world or someone just starting out. This really gets people.
Yeah.
The grind is confusing. There are so many different options. We talked about the grind being the shape of the sole. Now we're going to talk about bounce.
Okay.
And it really measures the club's resistance to digging. So if you've got something that doesn't have a lot of bounce, it's like a sharp butter knife. It's going to dig. If you have something that's
if it has little bounce, it will dig.
Correct. More bounce is going to slide through that turf or that sound and literally bounce through it.
Yeah.
Just keep going. And that's measured by, this is where we get technical.
Okay.
This gets measured by, if I was to lay this club flat on my hand and pretend this was the ground, the trailing edge, this back part of the club, is sitting on the ground. And it's really measuring the angle, the bounce angle is measuring the difference between on here where you are, that leading edge, how much it sits up or sits down on the ground. So for example, if we hold this club here on the ground right now and I was to open the club up, what happened to that leading edge? Did it get further away from the ground?
Yes.
Yeah. So that's adding bounce. It's now going to bounce through the sand and go faster or bounce off the grass.
But when you say added bounce, the player is adding bounce just by opening it up, or the club has the bounce?
Yeah. So it's measuring. Actually, here's a good one. I'm going to hold this club here, right down. Camera's got it on the side. So that leading edge is sitting up off the shaft a little bit.
Yep.
So it has some bounce. There's an angle between where it sits on here and where this club is here. So the angle might be 10 degrees, for example. If I now add some loft to that, that leading edge has really come up off the deck.
Yeah.
That angle now might be 30 degrees. It's a lot. So it's going to bounce off there a lot more. So a good example is when you get in hard pan conditions, you might have missed the fairway or just short of the green, but you're in that bare patch.
Yeah.
A lot of people know they need that ball to stop, and they think to open the club is going to help them get it higher and land it softer like we talked about before. But now off the hard pan, if I open this club up, kind of the bottom of the club is pointing at the ball.
Yeah.
That's a recipe for really, really fast golf shots that zip across the green.
Is she gone?
Is she gone? It's going to take out your playing partner's kneecap and into the back bunker.
Yeah. It's going to go into the neighbor's yard.
Right. We've all hit that shot. So
I would more de-loft it.
Okay.
In that hard pan.
Great. That's a really, really smart thing to do.
Is that like a safe idea? Yeah. Okay, but you're going to tell us that there's another?
No, I'm going to go on that because this is a really good point. When you de-loft that club, now that little angle, that leading edge was sitting up off the ground, it's now getting closer and closer and closer to the ground. So by de-lofting it, we've taken bounce away.
Yeah. Okay.
We've de-bounced it. I've never said that, but there it is. So that would dig a little bit more. So you are spot on.
Okay.
If you're in firmer conditions or if you're in firm sand in a greenside bunker, feel free to leave that club in the square position so it can dig through the sand and grass a little more.
Okay, so in firmer conditions, even in the bunker, like you don't have to open it up.
Nope.
Okay, because I'll tell you, there's a lot of people squawking in my ear that say, why aren't you opening up that club in the bunker?
You got to have the right conditions. And I think the really good wedge players will do that. This is probably the biggest difference I see between great wedge players and the everyday golfer who is unsure. The everyday golfer will walk over to that golf ball Tory with a club in hand before they've even seen the lie. So they've made their mind up that this is my sand wedge shot.
Yeah.
And then they get there and think, maybe it wasn't. I didn't know that was going to be there.
I'm going to hit it anyway.
Right. Pace of play. There's people behind me. My playing partner's already on the green. All these factors come into it, right? But if you watch a really good wedge player, they don't do that. They'll walk over to the lie first, examine it, pick a club that's going to work based off what their needs are, like a good tool in the toolbox.
Yeah.
What do I need for this job? Which screwdriver do I need? And then they'll play the shot. And ultimately, they won't waste any time. They might have saved the group time because they're probably going to hit a better golf shot.
Well, and just take 2 or 3 wedges with you to the bunker or to when you're walking across the green. Okay, so with bounce, what is going to tell what on the club when we're looking at all the selections will tell us what the bounce is.
Okay, so on the bottom of the golf club,
Mm-hmm.
couple of things we should know here. Number one, once you find the right golf club, it does not matter what's written on the bottom. So the big number here, the 60 that I have, and you have a 58, that's loft.
Yeah.
So that's going to go higher or lower depending on that, further or shorter. Doesn't matter. You just need a club that's going to go the certain distance for you. And then there's a little number here. Mine's got 08. Yours has 14. That's that bounce angle.
Okay.
So again, the lower that number, the more that club is going to want to dig into the ground. The higher the number, the easier it's going to work through the turf and the sand. So my 8-degree option here is pretty middle of the road, pretty Goldilocks. We've got lower. Some could be just too low for some players. Others, like you have there, the 14 might be a little high for some players. And generally, very general, if you look at the width of that sole, it's a really wide golf club.
So more bounce is going to be the wider.
Tends to be the way. Yeah.
Okay.
So that club you've got in your hand is really good for softer conditions, someone who takes a big divot, they're a little steeper, or someone who just needs a little help. We call that the ultimate bunker club. So if you need a little help popping it up out of the sand and over that lip, that's a really good option.
Yeah. It's the most forgiving.
Yeah.
Probably.
Most forgiving because it keeps that club going through the sand.
Okay. And you just touched a little bit on loft, but let's finish our term. So grind is going to be, when we're talking about the Vokey wedges, grind is the letter and the sole. There's the sole, but the letter is telling you what type of sole
and those letters came from Bob Vokey working with tour players all around the world, and some are named after their last names.
Yeah.
The number one thing here is you do not need to remember all these.
Yeah.
Go and see an expert in a golf shop anywhere in the country. You don't even need to know which grind is going to suit you, but they'll put their arm around you, give you a big hug, and help you find the right one.
Okay. So with loft, let's finish with loft then. So loft is going to be obviously the big number.
Right.
But I know a lot of listeners might be looking in their bag right now and it just says letters. It just says an L. It just says an S.
Yes.
It says a U sometimes or an A.
What does that even stand for?
I have no idea.
Okay. So why do we have numbers on the Titleist wedges? And we do it because we actually break the golf bag up into 4 different categories at Titleist. Metalwoods, so drivers, fairways, hybrids, irons, wedges, and putters. And we do that because we think it's the best way to build a golf bag, like that toolbox, bit by bit. What do I need for the given shot? Instead of just copy and pasting a full set all the way down to the shortest club. And the wedges are a specialty club. They're a specialty wedge designed to help you score around the green. So we put this loft number on the bottom to help players transition from their irons and then pick gaps that will help them with distance gapping.
Yeah.
And we always say around 4 to 6 degrees. 5 is pretty good. So let's say you've got a 50-degree wedge. And that's a gap wedge. That might be a club that most people use for full swings. And generally, that's probably the one that comes after the pitching wedge in the set. So that gap wedge that we call 50 or 52 degrees in some other sets might be the U wedge or the A wedge. But for us, we're putting a number on it.
Yeah.
Okay, so then where do we go? Then we're looking at 54s to 56s. They're what we would consider a traditional sand wedge. Now, where can you use a sand wedge? Anywhere you like. It doesn't have to be just the bunker.
Yeah.
And there's still a lot of players that we work with. Bob worked with a tour player from around the world last year that only ever used that sand wedge from the bunker because he thought he wasn't allowed to use it unless it was in the sand.
Yeah.
So he had really robbed himself of all these opportunities around the green as well. And then typically the lob wedge will be a 58 or 60-degree wedge. And they are a specialty wedge. Over the years, the sand wedge has transitioned to a lot of people playing the lob wedge. There is more loft. You can pop it up in the air pretty quickly, nice and high, and stop it softly. Or if you're doing it really well, it can help you do all of that and then drive out nice and low and stop. So I think certainly in my time in golf, the lob wedge has become more and more popular. A lot of people think it's pretty cool. You can pop it up high and do all these fun things with it, but that breaks out the different lofts from pitching, gap wedge, sand, and lob.
Well, let me ask you a question about the lob wedge. because I hear more times than not, and again, this is in my peer group, which is mostly women,
Yep.
and we're, just recreational golfers out there playing occasional tournaments, that sometimes the lob wedge can be their enemy.
Yeah.
Like it could go in timeout.
Yes.
Okay. The most clubs that go in timeout, driver, 3-wood, lob wedge.
Okay.
Okay. No one's putting their 9-iron in timeout. Okay.
Good point.
So what is it about the lob wedge that maybe it's not the right fit for you, or like why do you think some people might be struggling with their lob wedge?
Well, I think I'm going to use my mum as an example. She doesn't have a lob wedge anymore because if she does it well, that thing nearly goes up her left nostril as a right-handed golfer. I mean, it just goes straight up, Tori.
Yeah.
So when it goes straight up, it doesn't go very far.
Mm-hmm.
So she has this club that doesn't do anything for her unless she's trying to go over a bunker or something like that. She has very little use for it. And as it's popping up so high, it becomes one-dimensional. Just goes up and down, and it becomes a trick shot club.
Mm-hmm.
She also feels like she doesn't have very much control over that.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing that I see a lot with, so that's one thing, park that, doesn't go very far. Number two, you have to have a look at the lob wedge in your set and determine if it's something built specifically for greenside use, like a Vokey wedge, or is it the one that came with your full set of irons that says L on the bottom? And if that's the case, it's going to be really tricky because essentially what has happened in that set is you've copy and pasted your irons from 6-iron, 7, all the way down. We've just put more loft on the bottom of that club and called it a lob wedge.
Mm-hmm.
The bottom of it is usually really, really wide, and I'm generalizing. But when it's that wide, you're going to try and get that out of the sand. Your husband or your partner or your playing partners, whoever is going to be in your ear saying, you know what? You're in the bunker. You need to open this club up.
No, they say
you've got
all
this
the time.
Huge, wide sole on this L wedge.
Yeah.
And you open that thing up. The more and more you open it, the more that leading edge is going to be sticking up. And you've got the bottom of the club pointing at the ball.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to fly into the lip at a really fast rate. Or like we said before, jump out and try not to kill someone. But so that's typically what I see. If people are having trouble the most with that club, A, it's because it doesn't go very far and they have zero use for it.
Mm-hmm.
Or B, that's happening, that someone's telling them to open it up and it just doesn't have the workability or the versatility that something with a grind like this might have.
And then one other thing before we get into the fitting, okay, because I want to walk through a wedge fitting, is these clubs, again, I mean, they're beautiful. These Vokey wedges are beautiful.
They are.
Okay. One might look at it and say, I'm not good enough for that. I'm going to stick with my wedge that says L in it.
Right.
L on it. Like,
that's a
these look like the clubs that pros or really good golfers only use.
And they use it for a reason. So you make a great point. These are beautiful, shiny tools.
Mm-hmm.
And you look at it and think, wow, can I hit that? I think one of the things over my time in golf is people look at a specialty wedge like this and it looks like a blade. That blade club that's really skinny, doesn't have any technology in it. Man, they're hard to hit. They look scary.
Yeah.
This is not the case. They're specifically designed to help you in the bunker, around the green, get the most out of scoring. And like we said earlier in the pod, you don't have to hit it 300 yards to be good at the short game, but you do need the right tools. So you go back to my mum as an example. Justin Thomas, he can do different things around the green that she can't. So he might be able to get away with something a little more. He can create it himself. Spin, height, stopping ability. She needs this more than him. And he's the one using it, playing for a living. So she knows now that using this club just slides under the ball, gets it up and out of the sand almost every time she's getting out of the bunker. And that was goal number one. I didn't need to be great at bunker play. I just need to get out of the damn thing.
Yeah.
Whereas now, okay, I feel pretty confident. And then for her, going back a step into the fairway, because she's less scared about going into the bunker and getting out, she hits it in less bunkers because her iron play is freed up a little bit. So for anyone who's looking at a specialty wedge like a Vokey and thinking they look shiny, they look like the pros play them, and I don't think I'm good enough.
They look hard to hit.
Yeah, they're easy to hit for the purpose you're trying to play them.
Yeah.
If you want to hit it 100 yards in a big full swing, that might be different for you in your set. Go with something that's more of a full swing club, but definitely around the green, use the right tools for the job.
Okay, let's get into the fitting. So I just got fitted for the new SM10 wedges, Vokey wedges with Brandon.
You did. We brought a friend with us today.
Yes, exactly. And I didn't think Brandon was going to be here, so what a treat. So, Brandon, I walk up. Okay, I'm just going to go through the whole experience and we'll start from the beginning. Walk up. I have my bag. You have to bring your current clubs with you just so that you can look at them. And Brandon, what was the first thing we wanted to accomplish right away?
So, sounds like you guys covered a lot.
Covered a lot.
And
so when I go back to what you said, where you can do it with a net.
Yes.
I mean, come on, my listeners want the best option. I mean, I know there's lots of ways to do it.
Well, you had the best option.
Let's talk about what's available to
what's
them.
Good, better, best.
Yeah.
Then going to spend time with a fitter, whether that's indoors or outdoors, really is key because I think, we're all pretty comfortable getting fit for driver now. We know what we want. When it comes to irons, we're definitely getting there. Wedges, I think, as golfers, we're probably 10 years behind.
Yes.
We are not thinking about that like we do for our driver. We wouldn't walk into too many shops these days and buy a driver off the rack. We would probably get fit for it.
Yeah.
But wedges, we do. And there are more options. Like I said,
crazy.
That sea of wedges, eeny, meeny, miny, mo, I'll take that one. And then fingers crossed that's going to be the right one. But Brandon hit on a few really important points that you'll do a lot of the fitting yourself. So fitting is not scary. You just, ask a few questions, think about the answers. What do I actually want to do with this wedge? Do I want to open it up? Because if you never want to open this club up, fine, we have an option for you. We're not going to give you the options that are good for that player. So going back to the indoor-outdoor thing, we developed a fitting app a couple of years ago that helps you in 15 minutes find the right grinds, which is the trickiest part of the fitting. Brandon talked about hitting different shots, finding the right contact. You can do that indoors or outdoors. You just need to see where the ball's hitting the club face and it will tell you. And then even indoors, whether it's too hot here in Phoenix in summer or you're in Michigan and it's January and it's freezing outside, you can do it indoors and that launch monitor will tell you which option gave you the lowest flight, most spin, and best stopping power. So we developed that because it was nice and quick. You can do it in all conditions and it does all the hard work for you. You'll answer a few questions about the conditions you play in, Tori, what you like or dislike, what you want to do with that club. And then we're not going to take your word for it. We're going to ask you again, and then we're going to put you to the test.
Yeah, and then we're going to look at the numbers, which are actually telling us what's
going on. And we don't care where the ball goes.
Yeah.
There's a bit of that, but it's more important to find out what kind of player are you. So are you someone that takes big old divots or someone who doesn't? And the algorithm will work that out and do it for you. And I think even that is an important one, right? So you might see players and they say, hey, I don't take much of a divot. Well, what shot? Are you talking about your 7-iron?
Yeah.
Or a full swing from 50 yards? Because Jordan Spieth, he's a great example of a player who, when he plays a full swing sand wedge, that divot is a big one.
Yeah.
It's a big pancake. But when he's greenside, he's got a ton of speed, but he doesn't take a divot. The club slips underneath. So all of a sudden, he's two different players depending on the shot he wants to play. So he needs different tools for those requirements.
And I'm glad you brought that up because that was actually one of the harder questions I had to answer was how much of a divot do you take? Because you're right. If I have a 7-iron in my hand, I'm not taking much of a divot.
Right.
I call it a designer divot, which is like just little and,
That's a good term.
It's just,
high class
just slightly
term.
there.
Yeah.
Okay. And then, but when I get into the wedges, the divots will get a little bigger.
Yep.
So it's like, how do you answer that question? I mean, it's tough because sometimes when you're in these fittings and you're being asked these questions, do you open up the club face a lot?
Right.
It's like you think you want to answer it definitively, but then you think of times in your head, well, wait, I opened up the club here, or, oh, I took a great divot there. Oh, like the last time I hit a great wedge shot, the divot was bigger, or I'm thinning the ball now. Like there's so many.
The fitting process, I was in a role like Brandon's when I first started 11 years ago with Titleist. And I used to love getting in the van and drive around the country because you meet so many different people. But what you realize is it's more important to get the Q&A right, which you guys did up front, than to hit a million balls. It's just not what you need. You don't need to go and hit so many golf balls. We'll get you to hit different shots. And sure, if there's a bad one, we'll kick it out. We don't need to measure that.
Yeah.
But if there's a series of bad ones, it's probably telling us something. Either we're not comfortable or that club isn't working for us. And I love a fitting as a golfer because it's the one time you get to blame the tools.
Yeah.
It's the only time. Once we fit you into the right stuff, Tori, that's kind of off the table.
Then it's on you.
Right. So you go and you experiment and you try different things. And that Q&A working with a fitter, you really get to stop yourself and think, gosh, what am I actually trying to achieve here? Do I need that lob wedge? Do I need that club that goes straight up and down? And then you get to work from there.
Okay, so let's talk about how many wedges people typically have in the bag then. Like how many, I know it's going to change from player to player, but what really are we looking for?
Yeah, it depends on how much speed you have, really.
Yeah.
So if you're a player who hits it a long way, you might have a few less in there because you can cover different distance gaps. Again, if you hit it too short, you might only just have a sand and a lob wedge because they're kind of all going a similar distance. Most players would have 3 wedges after the set. So they might have a pitching wedge in the set and then a gap wedge to literally cover the gap between pitching and sand wedge. And then they'll have that sand and lob wedge. On tour, it varies. Some have 2, some have 4. I would say the majority of tour players have 4 wedges because they want to do different things. But typically we see anything from 2 to 3.
And again, that is something you're going to go through during the fitting and really figure out what you need for your game.
And a good fitter won't give you 5 wedges. They're not going to do that, as much as I would love that. I also don't want that because the last thing we want for you is A, having something that you don't know why you'll fit into it.
Yeah.
And B, having it do exactly what the other one does. So having a nice gap, as Brandon said, distance gapping between them, making sure they're not all landing on top of each other, and then complementing each other by doing different things. 2 or 3 is probably enough.
Okay, so let's get into the SM10s.
Okay.
How they're different from the 9s, right?
Yep.
All right, I was second guessing that myself there. So what changed?
Okay.
Why is this Vokey wedge just that much better than the last version?
There's a few different things in here. You joked about how we have so many options. We put a few more in there. Yeah, it wasn't confusing enough. So
because we want to cover all the players out there, right?
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
So that's what we did. So we added a 54 and a 58 degree option in new grinds. So it was really for players who need less bounce. We put that in there. The grooves are much the same as what we've had, but we always get better at that process. We learn so much to worry about how to improve the geometry of a groove. And I'm not going to get into that today because that's for R&D.
Yeah.
There's a team back in the office that has a whiteboard full of math equations and we're going to leave that to them.
Yeah.
But I can assure you they're working on something that spins more and more consistently. So we got really good at that with SM9 and SM10. And then this is really about flight and feel. So once you find the right grind that suits you and the conditions you're in, and you get that contact nice and low on the face, now it's all about how do we get the flight and the feel and the spin? And that's from center of gravity. So the R&D team moves material around on this club so that we can change the center of gravity. And straight away, when they explain that to me, it goes over my head. So I have to get them to explain it 2 or 3 times. And what they're trying to do is get the ball to come out lower. And the best way to do that is move the center of gravity in the golf club higher. Game of opposites. Okay. So they'll shift material, particularly here on this part of the club. They'll take some weight out of the bottom of the club and send it all the way up the top and make this top line of the club thicker. And by making that thicker, the material goes up, the mass and the CG properties go up, and it knocks the ball flight down. And they do all of that without us knowing. You and I don't have to think about it.
No, we do
not. And the best part is when we look down at the club in the playing position, it looks beautiful. You wouldn't sit there and think, oh my gosh, they added chunk of metal to the top. But even though it's a really technical term, center of gravity, it's important to what they're trying to do because, again, if we go back to this club looking like it's too hard to hit and it looks like a blade, there's a lot of cool tech under the hood of a wedge that we can't see that team's working on to make sure it's more forgiving, flight's lower, and you get a great feel out of it because when you hit it, when you've got the right grind and when you hit that good one that really connects with the golf club.
Oh, yeah.
And then equally, and it makes a great sound too, but when you get that clunky one that hits high on the club face, pops up in the air, lands short and rolls out, that's not much fun.
Yeah.
So you definitely know when you get the good one and they work on that constantly.
Yeah. We'll finish up with some fun things about ordering your brand new wedges.
Okay.
So there's now 4 different finishes.
There are.
So tell us, just the standard.
Yes. So we have Tour Chrome, which is this one here. This is a beautiful chrome finish. Yeah. But for the player who thinks that's a bit bright, particularly in the Phoenix sun out of a bunker, they might want something that's a little darker. So we have jet black, which is all the way there, like this microphone. A lot of people love that color. But we felt like we needed a genuine in-betweener, and that's where nickel comes in. So the nickel finish is this nice kind of stone finish to it, really is nickel. And that's a great in-betweener for if, hey, this is a bit too bright, this is a bit too dark, that one's great. And then there's a fourth one called Raw, R-A-W. And Raw really is a club that doesn't have a paint coating on it. And that's really popular on tour with all those players. And there's a huge misconception here from the everyday golfer that thinks that Raw one must spin more because the tour players use it and they, of course, spin the ball a ton. That's not the case. We have that Raw finish for the sole purpose that on the LPGA and the PGA Tour, we have fitters that have grinding wheels on the truck, Tori. So when they go in, you might get fit by Brandon, and then he says, you know what, I think if we could just take a little bit of the back off this club on a grinding wheel, you're going to enjoy it even more. So they run into the truck, get their goggles on and their mask and their gloves. They get on the grinding wheel and they take that off. They do that on Raw because if we were to do that on a plated finish like this, it would be more difficult to do, and B, it would look terrible.
Yeah.
That shiny
that
new
makes sense.
car would look like it's just been in an accident. So they use that finish, and then that's the one that starts off really pretty and then over time rusts. And that rust is meant to happen.
Yeah. I was going to ask you about that, the rust. Okay, so that
if you
means
buy a
it's
raw
a raw
wedge,
finish.
yeah, particularly if you're someone living in Florida, or you've got humid conditions down south, if you're a player who's living in those conditions and you buy a raw wedge, it's going to rust. Don't call us 3 or 4 days later. It's meant to happen. It's going to perform just great. And you'll probably be the envy of all your playing partners.
Exactly. I actually did pick the nickel finish because it
really
does, the sun, when it reflects at the perfect angle off the wedge, it can be super bright. So I was like, you know what, I'm going to try a different finish and see if it helps.
Yeah, and you're probably like me where you never ever thought of that until someone pointed it out. And then now you can't unsee how shiny it is.
Exactly. And you know what? We don't need one more thing to think about. I can't think about the sun blinding me as I'm trying to hit a ball close to the
Golf's got enough things going on.
Yeah. And then finally, the custom stamping.
Yes.
Okay, so this is available to anyone that orders a Vokey wedge.
It really is.
And tell us about it. Like, what you can just stamp whatever you want on there, and there's many different options.
There are a lot. It's getting bigger and bigger. In my time, it's got even bigger. But yeah, if you buy one off the rack, you're probably just going to take that home. You might change the grip in store. But for everyone else, you can custom order your wedge with length, shaft, grip, but the head is the fun part. So Wedgeworks is Bob's custom shop, and it's really what we've done for tour players for years and years, but you can do anything from stamping your initials on the back to some fun toe engravings that you can stamp on there, smiley faces, love hearts, whatever you want. Not whatever you want, actually, particularly when it comes to stamping. The machines and our team, they will pick up on certain things, and people try, Tori, they try to stamp unique things, I'll call it, on the back. But we're pretty good at stopping those and policing that. But it's kind of cool because people do love to make it their own. So whether that's their kids' names or dogs or football teams or whatever it might be, people like to personalize that wedge. And then you can change the color options as well. So anything on here, you can change the color, whether that's the loft, bounce, grind, letters and numbers, the BV wings on the back. So we see that a lot. I think more people spend more time personalizing their wedge to make it look pretty.
That's okay.
Than finding the right one, and it is okay. Yeah.
What is just stamped on your wedges? Anything? Or
I've got my kids' names.
Yeah?
Yeah.
I like it. Full name or just initials? Or
I've got their full name. They're not very long. So Louis, Holly, and Hugo. And then Aaron Dill did mine. So anyone that's got a U in it, he turned into a love heart. So that was pretty cool. Might be the O.
Well, how's your golf game going?
I haven't played enough this year. I've traveled a lot, but it's going okay. Yeah, I think as I play less, I learn to enjoy it more because the expectation level comes down, but I love golf.
I know I was going to ask you, how's your relationship with golf? So
I love
you're
it.
able to just go out there and enjoy it.
Yep.
Expectations are what they are.
Yeah, these days. So I'm a PGA professional that grew up playing a lot of golf, certainly not in a private club environment, more public. And then when I stopped playing, that was a little tricky for a couple of years. And then I went into instruction and I loved being a teacher. I would do that tomorrow if they kicked me out. So I love that aspect to it. It's a lot of fun. These days playing though, it's great to see the kids getting into it. And if I can take my favorite thing, Tori, is to play 6 or 9 holes as the sun's setting. I find it the best debrief. And then I come home and dad and husband's happy and it shouldn't be that way, but definitely when I come home after golf, everyone knows that where I've been happy. So yeah, expectation levels are down, but it's fun.
But you're enjoying
Enjoy
it.
trying different things.
Yeah. Well, thank you for being on the podcast today and educating us on how to get the proper wedges for our own golf game.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
I think it's really important. I think it's very confusing.
Yep.
And I think anything we can do to educate ourselves on it so that we have the best equipment possible in our golf bag, we got to do it.
I think the best thing you can do is ask yourself, what do I actually want to achieve around the green and out of the bunker? Mm-hmm. Have a think about it and then go and work with someone. Don't need to be an expert, but if you could do me one favor, think about it, go in store, work with a fitter. They'll do the rest. Absolutely. You might have to hit some shots, but it's going to be really fun.
And when do the new Vokey wedges become available?
Really soon. They become available to the public on March 8th. They're available for fittings and pre-order now. Mm-hmm. But if you want to walk into a golf shop and talk to someone, you can do that from March 8th.
And this is going to post right around March 8th. So it could be already ready to go. Go see it in your stores. Thank you, Corey. Thank you, Brandon, for fitting me the other day. It was a fabulous experience. And Corey, for making the trip out here and talking with us. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Tori. Anytime.